Hello, welcome to the ninth episode of Vote Home podcast. My name is Arun Prakash, and this is a special edition where I take the role of the host for this episode and I interview Mr. Narcis about the upcoming European elections 2024. Welcome, Narcis, to the show.
Hello, Arun, and thank you so much for taking my role and Zoe's role for one episode. It feels very nice to be on the other side for once. And hello, everyone. This is actually the only episode that will be video. No, actually, there will be two video episodes. The last episode will also be video where we're going to interview the only non-Danish citizen that's running in this EP elections from Denmark. You can check out that tomorrow. But otherwise, we are here to discuss about European Parliament elections. So Arun, what do you have for me?
Yes, today we have three major segments, and I'm going to walk you through one by one. The first segment is about the voting eligibility and process of the European elections. Segment 2 will be what are we voting for in these European elections. The third and the final segment is overview of the parties in Denmark. But before going through all of this, just to give you an introduction, I am an expat living in Denmark, and I'm curious about what is happening on the other side in Denmark and also in the rest of the Europe. So from an expat perspective, what are the voting eligibility and process? Could you guide us, Narcis, on the first segment?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I understand that you are currently not a European citizen, right?
I'm currently not an European, I'm a non-European citizen, and I'm in the transition phase where I'm looking forward to settle in Europe on the long run. So I'm also curious to know about the procedures or what are my rights being a non-European, what will be my rights when I'm becoming an European. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, what can I say now is that I know you're a EU resident, you're not a EU citizen yet, so unfortunately you cannot vote yet, but you'll be able most likely to vote next time there will be European elections, which are, by the way, are every 5 years. So there's plenty of time until the next round of EU elections in 2029. Imagine how far away that is. Incredible far away. But who can vote for European Parliament elections? It's quite simple. EU citizens over 18 years old. Simple as that. It's anyone that that has a citizenship of any of the 27 member states can vote. And if you are in the territory of European Union during the election day, you can vote, most likely. Here it depends a lot who you want to vote for, to be honest. Because if you want to vote for candidates from Denmark for the European Parliament, then you should have signed up 3 weeks before elections to vote for Danish candidates, if you are not Danish citizen. Or if you haven't voted before in the European Parliament elections in Denmark. If you are a EU citizen that wants to vote for a candidate from home state, so let's say you're Italian and you haven't signed up to vote for the Danish candidates, you can still vote for Italian candidates, but then you depend on your embassy to organize some voting section. Hopefully more than just Copenhagen, where the embassy is. Maybe they put one in Aarhus or other place. Like, for example, the Romanian embassy has organized 12 voting sections around the country. It makes sense. Also, the Romanian minority is also one of the largest ones in Denmark. But also there's the option to go home, right? You can take always a flight back home and you can go vote home if you want to. There's also that option.
But there's a lot of curious information here because I have a couple of questions. I will start with the first one, which is, when you talk about the member states and the deadlines, the election that is happening in Denmark is on the 9th of June 2024.
Yes.
So we technically have only a few days. So the elections are for the Danish parties, if I understand it correctly.
Well,
at the moment for the Danish candidates only.
No, on 9th of June, there will be elections all around Europe in the same day. Actually, in some countries, it starts 3 days before. From 6th to 9th of June. The whole weekend they have time to vote. In Denmark and most of the EU member states, it's just one day. It's 9th of June, so it's in the same day happening everywhere, literally. 450 million people coming out and to vote. I guess you experienced that, right, in India, right, where you are even more, 1 billion, almost 1 billion people. I'm not sure if you passed that.
Yeah, 1.4 billion people in India, and currently we have We have the constitutional elections just ended with the current
Okay.
government again getting elected for the third time in a row. And
So that,
I could actually connect the European elections to also kind of an Indian election, because we have
exactly.
Union of States. India is a formed
Yes.
country with Union of States, and European Union is more or less the same sort. But every country has its own freedom and sovereignty. Walk us through on what are the rights does each of these states have when it comes to European elections.
But I'm not sure what you mean by rights, because the European.
So
Okay,
so
so first of all, these are elections to the European Parliament, right? Which is the only
mm,
directly elected transnational institution in the European Union.
mm,
So
mm,
basically, each the citizens of each member state decide who should be the representatives of the European Union citizens in the Parliament. So when they
mm,
get elected there, they don't
mm,
represent the Danish people, the German people, the Romanian
mm,
people. They go there and then they join a group of like-minded people. Let's say that I'm a
mm,
green progressist and I want
mm,
a more green Europe. When I go
mm,
in the European Parliament and I'm elected there, I'm
mm,
not going to join
mm,
my Danish delegation of 15 people, because 15 people out of
mm,
720 doesn't mean much. So I will not have much influence. I'm going to
mm.
join the
Yeah.
green delegation of like-minded people. So together, hopefully, we are more than 15, and we can try to
Mm,
have some weight when they negotiate how the money should be spent, when they negotiate new strategies for the development for the future, and so on.
mm.
So
That's
that's, I'm
interesting
not sure if
because
that's what you meant.
yeah, I actually meant that, because when I elect a prime minister candidate, he has, let's say, the power to distribute projects, funds, all these initiatives across the country, but based on growth sectors and social economic zones. Do we have something similar, like, let's say, green initiatives? And will the green initiative formed by, let's say, minority candidates like 15, 16, do they still have the access to uh, use these to execute projects across European Union, or how does it work? How does the projects come into fruition when something is passed?
Well, then we can start looking a little bit at the legislative process in the European Parliament.
Mm,
Unfortunately, unlike a national parliament, the European Parliament doesn't
mm,
have the right of initiative. So basically, they need to
mm,
wait for another institution called the European Commission to take initiative.
mm,
So they come up with an idea. Let's make this law. They present
mm,
it to European Parliament. European Parliament can make amendments to it. They can make changes to it,
mm.
and then
Okay,
it goes to the council. The council is where the
okay,
ministers, the national ministers, are present, and then it goes
yeah,
back to the
yeah,
Parliament, and then it goes back to the council, and then it's finally approved in a form of either a regulation, which means that it's supreme
yeah,
law and it applies directly everywhere on the territory of European Union, or it's a
mm,
directive where it has to be adopted and transcribed into national law by the different
mm,
national parliaments. So that's kind of
mm.
what the power is in the European Parliament. If that's the direction you're wondering how it functions, the European Parliament
I,
has certain powers, but also has certain limitations. To be honest, one of their biggest powers
mm,
is the fact that they can decide. Well, they have they have the final say over the budget of the European Union. How should the EU
mm,
money be spent? But still,
mm,
is the European Commission who,
mm,
let's just say, draws the draft, makes a draft. Okay, so we feel like 100 million should go there, 300 million should go there, and then the Parliament is like, let's make 10% change here, 10% change here. So that's
mm,
kind of the two directions, because the Commission is like the European government. Imagine the
mm,
president of European Commission is the most powerful president from all three of them. We have three main institutions, right? European
mm,
Commission, European Parliament, and the European Council. And then
mm,
in the European Commission, we have the president of European Commission, which is basically like the president. Then you have the president of
yeah,
European Parliament. It's more like a ceremonial role. And then you have the president
mm,
of the European Council, again, very much as like a ceremonial role. So in the end, the president of the European
mm,
Commission is one of the most important roles,
mm,
and it's actually the person that has to be, um, first of all, it has to represent like the party that got the most votes in the European Parliament elections. And then you might wonder, if you vote for Danish parties, how do you see a majority on a European level? Have you ever thought
Exactly.
about that?
Because if I actually wonder, if I cast a vote for a Danish candidate, and I like his idea and I want him to succeed with his goals going forward, how does it get materialized, and what influence does he have, even though he has a majority from Denmark or something? So how does it materialize into physical, tangible projects or something?
To be honest, the parties in Denmark matter very little when you go to European Parliament elections. Because
Okay.
each party in Denmark needs to be part of a European party, European group, let's
Okay.
just call it.
Okay.
And then, so basically, every time let's say that, well, I like EPP, which is European People's Party at the European level, right? They are a center-right Christian Democrat group. Well, if you want your vote to go to EPP, you have to vote either Conservatives or Liberal Alliance. Or you can say, well, I like the socialists and progressives on European level. Well, then you have to vote the Social Democrats in Denmark. Oh, no, I'm a liberal. I really like Renew Europe and Macron. I love Macron. Well, if you love Macron, you actually have three options in Denmark. You have Radikale Venstre, you have Moderaten, and you have Venstre. Three different parties who all belong to the same European family. Or let's just say, well, I'm a green-minded person. I really like the Greens in Germany and their leader. Fantastic. You can vote for SF or for Alternative. As I said, like, to be honest, it's about what are they part of on a higher level.
High level across
More
Europe,
than
other countries. Yeah.
exactly, because
A quick.
different national parties, they come together on ideology, right? That's what unites them. And then when they are in European Parliament, they fight together in big groups, right? Because it's 720 members of the Parliament. I mean, imagine that size of it.
That's a lot of members, right?
Yeah.
That brings us to another question. What are we in Denmark, or in general the people in Denmark, are voting for in these elections from your perspective? What is Denmark's perspective on these European elections? What are the main themes that we expect?
Oh, the main themes. Okay, well, to be honest, I think if you look at the parties in general, you'll see climate change very much present. Almost,
Yes.
besides, I think, one or two parties, literally almost every other party campaigns on being green and campaigns on having various degrees of how much focus should be on green transition, how fast should we be climate neutral from a CO2 perspective. Of course, there are some, let's just say, twists to it, because they have to somehow position themselves differently so people can understand, okay, who should I go for. So of course the conservatives can say we are green, but at the same time would like these green policies to be business minded. So if we come up with green ideas, let's make it so that they are somehow profitable on the market. So you see, they take a different look at it. Or if you look at Alternative, they are more focused, okay, how can we do more intervention to actually change consumer behavior? Reduce how much meat you eat, reduce how often you take the plane, and so on. So all of them want, they want less, let's just say, less CO2 emissions, just different ways of where they want to make that reduction from. So that's kind of what makes them different. But in the end, they're all pro combating climate change. There is only one party I heard that says that we should calm down with this whole hysteria of climate change. And there's another party who simply doesn't believe in climate change. He thinks it's a hoax or something like that. I'm not going to name them, but I think
But I get it. I get it.
the guide.
So as you pointed out, the main theme is actually greenhouse emission and climate change,
Yes.
which brings us to another question, which is, are these agendas the same in a local election for prime minister candidate, or is it because Denmark is also the front runner of wind energy and renewable sources of energy? So do they want to establish as a country's objective? How about the internal politics? Because locally we have, let's say, agendas with regards to social security in Denmark. I've also read a lot of news articles about Denmark's stand on immigration policies. are they also part of the agenda, or do they just have them only in the local elections, and the main focus is just on the environment policies? Do you get
I
my
mean,
question?
okay, there's multiple focuses on the European elections.
Yeah.
It's not just
Yeah.
environment, of course. As you said, migration unfortunately became quite a big topic as well, because right before the start of the election campaign, they passed the migration pact on European level, which means now that the countries have two choices. When refugees come to Europe, countries can either accept a certain number of refugees, or they can pay so others take them.
Okay.
There's the two choices. And then, of course, there is all these wishes, right? For example, there are several parties who are campaigning for, let's just say, asylum seeker, I don't know how to call them,
Asylum seekers, right?
refugee,
Yeah.
yes,
Refugee.
refugee spaces or refugee camps to be created outside of European Union. So, for example, Rwanda, Albania, in other places, so that if you're applying as a migrant to come to Europe, you should be first processed there to see for sure if you're a refugee or if you're a migrant for economic reasons.
Okay,
And then
that's
you
interesting.
decide if you come. So that's one. To be honest, that's one of the. Let's just say at least half of the parties in Denmark want an idea like that. There's also the more extreme ones who want a wall. They would like a wall. There's this Western Balkans who are still not part of European Union. They kind of want to build a whole hedge around the Balkans, and they want to build a wall on the Eastern Front with Russia, because Russia is using a lot migrants from Africa and Asia, and they're trying to like move them quickly from the border to the border of Finland, so they can pass into, so they could put pressure on the European internal state.
Okay.
So it's a tool used now in this hybrid warfare. So they kind of want to build a wall around external borders of EU, and at the same time they want to increase surveillance of the Mediterranean Sea, and they are working. Well, the idea was that they would like to have deals with various countries in the North Africa, so that they can actually return the boats, because right now they're not allowed. They cannot return the boats because the countries there will not accept them. Right, so they want to make a deal like just they had to Turkey, where they stop the flux of people there, basically.
Okay.
So that's another thematic that was quite prevalent in the topics. Of course, it's a lot of discussion about Sweden, right? They keep looking at Sweden and they say, oh my God, how it failed in Sweden, and we shouldn't end up like Sweden, and they keep using that as an argument. And of course, it's a bit sad because we are not Sweden. The way the Danish society is built is different.
But here I have a question. What is different in Sweden that is not happening in Denmark? Yeah, because I'm also completely new to the geopolitics within the Nordic countries. But yeah.
Gang wars mainly. Something that a reality that we don't really have here in Denmark is open gang wars on the streets of the major cities in Sweden. And they use that as an example of how things can go badly, and they presume that most of the gang members in Sweden are of a international background. So that's why they say
the
that
immigration laws
Denmark
are a bit different.
In Sweden, yes, they have been for many years. Sweden has been the most welcoming country there is in Europe by far.
Okay.
Yeah. So definitely. I mean, I liked Sweden for how open they were and how open-minded they were to the idea of allowing people to cross borders. But what Sweden has done really bad is that they kind of allowed people to build different realities in the same society, and they never bothered to include them. So Swedes just further seen about their life. They felt good about themselves. They let them in, but they never really accepted them as part of their own little societies and groups. So then out of nowhere, you were welcomed into a country, but you were not really welcome because you were just sitting on the outside of, it was the same situation, making a Swedish friend or becoming part of with Swede, or Swedes ever marrying a non-Swede. not really something that people accepted much, so that's why out of nowhere you woke up with young people who got angry. They grew up in Sweden, they never felt Swedish, and they had this alienation process, and that makes you angry, and when you're angry you tend to do even criminal stuff. That's how it is.
So the
Anyone
so the
can become a
integration
criminal.
is not the same. Yeah. So
No,
there's a
it's
different
not.
immigration.
It's completely different, and they really do it badly. I mean, their idea was that they are very open, but at the same time they were very closed, which is very paradoxical, right? While in Denmark
Okay.
they are closed on both sides. At least they're open about it. It's like you are not welcome to Denmark, but at the same time,
Yeah.
just expect if you come to Denmark, you also not going to be welcome anyway. So just you already know from the get going,
Yeah.
you are not welcome here. Therefore, do what you can about your life in Denmark, so you
Yeah.
can enjoy it.
Well, I could actually say something about my life in Denmark. I mean, I got a job offer, so I was not one of a migrant, but I'm still considered to be an expat even today. And but the immigration opportunities that I see is quite surprising for me, because I feel like if I could figure out the language, and if I'm able to live by the values that the Danish government has, I think it's a matter of choice if you really need to settle in Denmark. For me, I've considered Copenhagen as my second home. I come from a country in India, south of India, a place called Chennai. And most of my work life has been in Copenhagen at the moment. I've only worked there for 4 years. I've been 5.5 years in Copenhagen already, and I see a huge transition. And just to compare with the lifestyle that I have in Denmark, it's sophisticated. I have access to infrastructure. I can actually list. The list goes on, and that has led me to actually see. Okay, you know what? I need to have a future in Denmark, because I feel I have huge opportunity in terms of access to technology, and also my job, the current job that I have, and I see the next 10 years is fruitful. From that context, I feel like it's my choice to decide. You know what? I can make use of whatever I have in Copenhagen and make my own life in Denmark, as long as I abide by the rules of what a citizen should do, and live by the values that I have. And but there are other issues that I also hear about expats and immigrant stories, which I completely understand from their standpoint. But I have a completely different picture from my perspective, and I'm also happy for what I am and who I am today within Denmark.
Arun, the question was not so much about you, because the first generation also in Sweden of people were very grateful to be there, and they try their best to make the best of the situation. The problem was your children who will be born here.
The next
And they're
generation.
not exactly Danish looking children, let's be honest about it. Their experience is what matters. Will they feel part of being here or not? Because you will get over it. There is worse out there, and you are happy for the quality of life, first of all.
Exactly.
For you, friends and networks less important. The fact that you have access to infrastructure is a lot more important.
Basic
But
needs,
your
right?
children will not see it that way. They never lived in Chennai. They
Yeah.
don't see the bad the bad alternative. So they are born in Denmark, and they expect to have the same opportunities as anyone else born in Denmark. So that's when your struggle will start. So I know probably you're not a father yet, but at some point you might be. So then you'll have a different discussion on that. But of course, that's not a topic for this podcast. It's more to talk about
But
European Union
but
and the parliament.
of course, but let's focus on the third segment then, which is I'm a little curious about how many parties are there currently in Denmark that are eligible to actually be elected for an European election. Are all the parties eligible, or how does it work?
Well, I mean, there is 11 parties who got the chance to run for elections. You need to gather a minimum number of signatures, which I think is like 70,000 or something like that, to be able to run. But if you're represented in the Danish parliament already, you have technically the signatures to be running for European Parliament as well. There was 12 parties actually. There was also this new Borgerlige that was also in the run, but they closed in the middle of the campaign. So we have 11 parties, and actually we don't have any independents in other countries. Other EU member states, there are independent candidates. In Denmark, we actually don't have any. So we have 11 parties in total that you can choose from. Of course, remember, they're technically less parties because, remember, 3 parties are part of the same European party, 2 parties the same, 2 parties the same. So actually, in reality, the choice is between like 5, 6 European parties, if you think about it.
And we also discussed about the themes that these parties are bringing up in this year. But in general, what has been the history about Danish politicians' influences in the European elections? Going back, let's say, last year and the year before, how has Danish politicians influenced the European market?
To be honest, there isn't the influence of Danish politicians in European politics is very limited. To be honest, because it has been the tradition in the past that usually people who are done with Danish politics or people who the party wants to kind of slowly get out of the way, they will propose them for the European Parliament, and usually you don't get the most talented people out there, unfortunately. That also means, because what it means is that when you're in Copenhagen in the Danish Parliament, the media continuously sits on you. When you're in Brussels, the Danish media rarely talks to you. So they kind of forget that you're even there. So it's a great way for many parties to kind of get rid of, let's say, big names, but at the same time, names that might be hurting the party right now in Danish elections. So now it's for you a good time to go away. But at the same time, we have noticed this year, in this round of elections, a lot of parties have chosen to actually go with new candidates, young people. That's why you have maybe noticed a lot of young faces on the poster. That's a great change. I find that to be a great change. So I have big hope actually from this round of elections. There's a lot of talented young people who might be doing a lot of big changes on the European level. We also have some people coming from the business world who are running for the first time that don't come from a political background, who also might act differently in that environment. To be honest, the most influential Danish person in EU politics has been Margaret Vestager.
Yeah, and I've read them in the books.
She was the commissioner, of the Danish commissioner. She was vice president of the European Commission, and she was able to really make an impact on how she went after the big American corporations, right, and getting them to pay proper taxes in Europe. That's something, right? She really made a name for herself in that way. Can we say that about other politicians? Maybe Margaret Auken, that just retired because she reached a certain age, from SF. She was like a huge locomotive for SF. Every time they were ensuring, because of her, they were getting enough votes. She did some... she had some impact over packaging and how it should be treated in a way. Basically, if you remember the straw, you shouldn't have plastic straw anymore, and that's all related to what she was fighting for. Something with plastic bags, that we are not allowed anymore to simply buy 100,000 plastic bags and just throw them around everywhere. That's something that she has made a point in. But besides that, I cannot say other Danish members of the parliament have really made an impact on the European Parliament. It's also difficult, honestly speaking. You are part of a delegation of 15 people representing a country of 6 million people out of 450 million. Imagine in India, what's the smallest state you have?
I have to think about it, but I think it's usually the union territories in India that are the underrepresented or very minorities. I don't represent the minority, but I guess the smaller states with less than 10 candidates in a constitution out of 500 seats. So I could actually imagine the ratio when I compare the union states, right? Coming back to the candidates, when you spoke about young candidates, when I think about young candidates in India, it's usually hereditary, like either their father or mother used to be in politics. How does the scene play in Europe? Do these young candidates have some sort of influence from their elder generation, or they're like completely independent?
Well, we have different stories, right? You have the dynasties, the political dynasties, where the great-grandfather, the grandfather, the father, and now the son or the daughter or the cousins, they all have the same name. And to be honest, the fact that they wear the same name gives them enough votes to get elected, because people got used. There is that family. We know what kind of politicians that family produces. At the same time, let's not forget that every political party in Denmark, and I'm pretty sure also in other member states in Europe, they have a youth party. So in Denmark, you have, when you're young, you can choose, instead of starting in the party itself, in the adult version of it, let's just say you can actually start at 13 or 14, you start in the youth party. And in the youth party, you get to practice and to play with policy, not play, but actually try to get as much influence as possible on a local level. You try to get ideas on the national agenda as well. So you actually get the chance to train for a couple of years. So by the time you're 18, you have 40 years of political experience behind you.
Yeah, that's
obviously that's why
something interesting.
Yeah, so that's why you have so many young candidates. They are not technically young in political age. I mean, if I am 55 and I just joined politics and I run for the first time, I'm 1 year old, right? But if someone is 21 and has started 14, this person has 6 years of experience.
6 to 7 years of experience, right?
It's about experience, political experience. What is politics, right? It's a tool. It's a means, right? You have to know how to negotiate with others to get anything passed. There is no such thing that me and my ideas are majority in any sort of context. Never. That's not impossible. That's not possible. That means that to ever get any of my ideas to become reality, I need to get the others to support them, which means I need to be very good at negotiating. I need to be very good at personal skills, how to handle people, how to not create fights, how to not use the campaign to talk bad about future collaborators. That's why, for example, unlike American politics, in Denmark, you're rarely gonna see politicians using bad campaigning on their opponents, right? They focus more about themselves, not so much talking about the others. There are some who kind of break the rules, honestly, but the general attitude is that we don't talk bad about our competition, basically.
And I also saw some of the earlier podcasts that you have been featuring these candidates, interviewing them. What is your impression about these candidates based on your interaction with these party leaders, party representatives?
Well, to be honest, I mean, we have some impressive candidates this time. Like we have Kira, right, from the SF. She got elected as the youngest member of the European Parliament ever, 19 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So now she's at her second mandate, and she's 24. This is her second mandate, right?
And SF is Socialistic Folkeparti, is it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I've seen those banners with red colors. Yeah.
That says something. Now, you have a lot of talent around coming up, and many parties are going through this transition period where let's just say the older generation is kind of ready to let go and let the new generation come in front. In some parties it already happened, in some parties it's in the progress, in some parties they're still far away from it. But that's the whole idea, right? We have to wait and see what these parties bring. And to be honest, I'm really happy to meet these young candidates, because a lot of them, even though they might be from right-wing parties, left-wing parties, generally they all grew up and like kind of understood that they're now part of European Union. So their ideas are not about should we leave European Union or not. Their ideas are, how do I want European Union to look like in the future? So it's more of a debate about how it should look in the future, not so much about should we exit it or not. This zero-sum game. There is actually one political party campaigning for Denmark to exit European Union. DF,
Okay.
our dear old DF.
The Danske Folkeparti, is it?
Exactly. They're campaigning for
Okay.
it, but they're also like, not now. Maybe in 2035 we might make a referendum about it. Maybe if
Okay.
the majority of the parties agree with us, or if not, at least in the next 50 years. Okay. Nobody has the courage to ask for an exit directly, immediately now, because of what happened in Britain. I mean, it was very, very clear. All the numbers show that the moment Britain exited European Union, they had a huge economic downfall. Denmark is
It
even
is.
worse because we're smaller, 6 times smaller, and we're dependent on selling to Germany and France our bacon. If we stop that,
And
then we are
also
not in a good
renewable
position.
sources. Yeah. We have to
Exactly.
depend on
Literally, we
renewable
live out
sources,
of.
right?
We are not Norway, right? We cannot afford this sense of, yeah, we have our oil. What do we care, right? No,
Yeah.
we have to sell. We have to imagine,
Yeah.
build, sell. Imagine, build, sell. That's what Denmark lives out
Yeah.
of. It's innovation.
Yeah.
It's literally a country of innovation, right?
Exactly. It's only brain-driven solutions and not any natural resources that we have within the country.
We don't have
It's
any.
going to be a
What
huge
natural
debate. Yeah.
resources?
We don't.
It's a
Yeah.
flat land from one side to another. What resources have you seen around? We have some forests. We have a lot of farms, a lot of pigs. Fair enough. But what resources? Denmark would be very poor if we didn't have brain capacity. Really, honestly, Denmark was poor before we realized that what we could cultivate is education, and that's why Denmark invests so much money into education, because this is literally what it produces money for it. If other countries, like for example my home state, will understand finally that the future is putting as much money as possible into education. You should have the issue where too many people have a high education and you try and convince them to take a vocational education, not the other way around. But that's
so they spread across different sectors and the even scale. Because in India currently the problem is there's too many engineers but not too many jobs to fill in those candidates, and that's also a huge problem within. Some are overqualified, some are underqualified. So, and coming back to these parties, what makes me think about the mandates of young politicians and their ambitious plans. Walk us through on the future of Danish politics from your perspective, for the expats who are new to Denmark. What do we see in the next 5 years that Denmark is going to play? Of course, there's only 50% of the people who vote on these European elections, and what impact does it bring in return to Denmark, even if we are serious about this 50% people?
You have to understand this, that European Union Parliament and European Union institutions in general, they play a major role, because more than 70% of what laws we have in Denmark come from European Union. To be honest, Danish Parliament passes very little things. Most of what they do is that they transcribe into law what they receive from the European Parliament. Few people understand that part, that actually the European Parliament creates a lot more legislation on various fields than Danish Parliament ever does. Danish Parliament uses a lot of time just simply transcribing from from European law into national law. And then there's this few issues where they do their own impact, but that's it. So it's very important. The European Parliament elections are a lot more important than people realize, even though the voting percentage for the Danish Parliament is close to 90%, which is incredibly high, and yes, for the European Parliament is closer to 60%. Huge difference, right? But at the same time, because people feel like the Danish Parliament is closer, and they can be more, I don't know, they can keep them more to under watch, while the European Parliament in Brussels, it's too far away. But at the same time, this is also the question of the media. If the media will spend more time in Brussels and bring you to the Danish TV, it will not matter if it's Copenhagen or Brussels, to be honest. Because in the end, Copenhagen is very far for us. We are in Aalborg, for example. Copenhagen is very far of us. People really don't like Copenhagen here in the north. You come with an accent from Copenhagen, people will know, I will notice. If I want to win votes in Aalborg, I just have to say something bad about Copenhagen, and there you go. People just don't like Copenhagen, right? It's very far away. So for them, it's irrelevant if it's Copenhagen or Brussels. Both are far away, right? So it's in the end a question of the media, right? The media should spend more time in Brussels, where most of the legislation is being done, and a lot less time. Well, not a lot less time, but at least give equal time to what's happening in Brussels. Because a lot of yes, what's not exciting is that a legislation process in Brussels takes a long time because it has to go through so many steps, right? So it's a very lengthy process. So media doesn't like that, right? It's too long for a story to, okay, so now it's past the first hearing. And then 8 months later, finally, we have a law for the
So it's
next 10
almost
years.
a year. Yeah, like 8
Yeah,
to 10
well,
months.
more. Even
Okay.
more, to be honest. It can take even 5 years. So,
Okay.
because sometimes it comes
That's
back
like
and go, back and go. But while in the Danish parliament, it's a lot faster. It can be 2 months, a month to pass a law, right? But at the same time, a lot of those laws have already been passed at European level, and they just have to be transcribed into Danish law. So there's not much to discuss. The only thing you can make amendments to is how do you implement it, but you have to implement it. It's not a question of if not. It's just a question of how. That's the freedom that the national parliaments get in there. So yes, the vote is very important for European Parliament, and it's important to actually know who is your member of the European Parliament, right? That's why every region, for example, fights to have at least one from their region to be there, right? Regardless which party that person comes from. Like right now in the North Denmark, where I'm from, we only have, I think, like 4 candidates who are from here, from all the many who have chances to get elected, right? And we last time, like in the last round of elections, none got elected from North Denmark.
Okay.
So literally, we didn't have a representative in European Parliament.
Lady from Jutland. Okay. Is it the entire Jutland, or is it just the North and
No,
Aalborg?
just the North.
Aalborg.
Just the North.
North. Okay.
So
Okay.
North Denmark didn't have a representative. So now the question is not so much about who should we vote for. People just think, okay, we have these 4 realistic candidates who can actually have a chance. People will spread between the 4 of these people. That's it. You might like maybe a party, but that party doesn't really have a candidate here in North Denmark. Well, it sucks for them. It's a bit.
Yeah.
People in Denmark are very much about their village, their city, their region, and then Denmark, and then European Union. So you have to understand, people are very locally minded here, and they see their neighbors on their street as line 1. My street. If someone from my street is running for anything, I support those people. If someone from my street has a certain business that I can be a customer of over another business, I will be supporting that business. That's how the mindset works in here, you know. So that's why that's what it's about, right? It's about trying to make sure that each region in Denmark is somehow represented. I'm hoping someone from the North Denmark will also get elected in the 15 people, because you need 6.7% minimum. It's not a limitation, like you could have a lot less as a party, but if you think about it, if you divide the number of people who vote by number of seats, 15 is roughly something like 6.7%. But you have to understand that they're not very public about it, but some parties make alliances, electoral alliances. They're not very visible, honestly speaking, but that means that if one party, let's say that we are the Social Democrats and went in alliance with SF, and we managed to get enough votes for 2 seats, and now it's just a question about the 3rd seat. Well, if SF has 60% of what's needed for that 3rd seat, they will get their 1st seat. If we only have 40% of what's needed, if we have 60% of what's needed, we just take the votes from SF. They get none, but we get a 3rd one. You understand? So sometimes that's why it can happen that a party with 4% or 3% can still get a seat in the European Parliament, because they were part of a electoral alliance with maybe a bigger party. So, or maybe there were multiple small parties together.
Yeah. Well, Narcis, I think that was a lot of information for me. I think we have covered a lot of stuff, starting from voting and eligibility to the process, and what it means to vote for these elections, being a European citizen or a representative from a European country. And you also spoke about the overviews of parties in Denmark and how they contribute and what are the candidates, about the candidates in these elections. So, first of all, thank you so much for enlightening me with all these informations and facts and figures. And for the listeners on the other side, I hope this was of value with the special edition with Narcis. Don't forget to subscribe and share this to your friends and family. And have a good one. Thank you, Narcis, for joining us on the show.
Yes, and thank you, Aaron, for hosting this special episode. And reminder to everyone: check out Last Week in Denmark. There is a proper guide on this elections round. It was first part published already. There's a second part coming now on 9th of June, where you can get deeper into what happens after the elections and also about these different European parties that some of you have asked after we published last time. Otherwise, this has been a first, let's just say, test of working with Arun. You might see this formula in the future under the Last Week in Denmark podcast, which might come back after a very long break, unfortunately. But until then, keep up with what we are saying in Last Week in Denmark.